Happy New Year. I know we're already fully a month into 2025, which is crazy because it feels like January is always one of those months that just refuses to end. And now Valentine's Day is 2 weeks away, which seems really crazy. But here we are. Welcome to the reading room. I'm Stephanie, and this is the playlist where I review what I read in the last month, and I do my best to keep these reviews spoiler free. If I have to, I will warn you when I'm about to spoil something so you can jump ahead and go into these books completely blind. And as I say in all my reviews, these are solely about the books and not about the authors as people. Sure, they're absolutely lovely. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the 7 books that I read in January 2025. So first up was definitely Better Now by Ava Robinson, which I got with Book of the Month, and I'm pretty sure this was my December Book of the Month box, as the story does take place around the holidays. There's a little bit of a subplot there. I was really hoping to read this in December. Obviously did not pan out for me, so let's go ahead and see what this book promised. The very last person anyone should worry about is Emma. Yes, hi, she's an alcoholic, but she's officially been sober for 1 entire year. That's 12 months of better health. 52 whole weeks of focusing on nothing but her 9-to-5 office job, group meetings, and avoiding the kind of bad decisions that previously left her awash in shame and regret. It's also been 365 days of not dating. And with her new dating profile, Emma, 26 of New York, is ready to put herself back out there. Except, was dating always this complicated? And did Emma's mother really have to choose now to move in with her new boyfriend? Being assigned to plan her office's holiday party feels like icing on the suddenly very overwhelming cake, until her estranged father reappears with devastating news. Icing, meet cherry on top. But then there's Ben, the charming IT guy who, despite Emma's awkwardness and shortcomings, seems to maybe actually get her. Sobriety is turning out to be far from the flawless future Emma had once envisioned for herself. But as she allows herself to open up to Ben and confront difficult past relationships, she's beginning to realize that taking things one day at a time might just be the perfectly imperfect path she's meant to be on. Bittersweet and darkly hilarious, Ava Robinson's debut novel about navigating sobriety and complicated family dynamics is witty, heartbreaking, and profoundly relatable. And I definitely have to agree. So I'm not gonna lie, I legit cried while I was reading this. And I don't think I've cried over a book. Mine is crying because it's so bad, or fortunately, sometimes because it's just so funny, since reading Sirius Black's death in Harry Potter. I mean, spoiler alert for that, but that's been out for years. If you don't know that by now, I'm not ruining anything. This moved me to tears. It was raw, it was emotional, and I felt so many feelings while reading it. Emma really is a hot mess, but she's making her way towards lukewarm mess. She's doing the work, and she really wants to be her best self, her best sober self. She's also learning who to allow into her new life, and understanding who she is without her crutches of drinking and doing drugs. Now, I'll say real talk here. I started drinking when I was a young teen, and while it didn't manifest itself into becoming a bigger thing in my life or giving me a lot of problems, I really understood younger Emma. I found her very relatable. I related to her wanting to numb things and just let her guard down with the help of alcohol. She's always been this party animal and been able to escape having to deal with it or the consequences of her choices. Now she's sober and experiencing all these things without the distraction and facing who she used to be. She's letting go of this version of Emma that wasn't really healthy and figuring out who she really is. And I really love to see her journey. I also really loved the humor in this. It's not a non-stop laugh or a quip kind of story. So when the humor hits, it really hits. Or at least it did for me. I was definitely chuckling and laughing through my breath while reading this. I found it very funny. And again, it has a really good balance of the funny moments plus the moments of her embracing who she really is. Now, I will say I did struggle a bit in the beginning as it has a slower pace than I expected, but once I settled in and like understood the pacing, I really liked this. I think this is very slice of life and in a way kind of read like one of my favorite reads from last year, The Wedding People. Now, not as funny as The Wedding People, but it gave me some of those same like feelings of just feeling that hope, that optimism. Like by the time I was done with this, I felt very hopeful, even though the book covers some very heavy topics. Now, I will say this is very much in the category of contemporary fiction or women's fiction, more so than romance. I think it might be billed as a romance technically, though I really did adore her relationship with Ben. I will say there's a moment in their relationship that annoyed me as it felt extremely forced and just put in there to like drive conflict between her and Ben, but it was resolved very quickly, which again makes me feel like it was kind of shoehorned in. But other than that, I really did like their relationship. I just thought they were both so adorable and perfect for each other. I loved that their relationship felt very realistic. It's kind of awkward. They're both sweet with each other. And it just really felt real with like their first interactions and like they're texting each other. I thought it was so cute. Made me miss being like 25 and single and being like, hee, like I'm texting a guy I like, and it's really fun sitting on my couch and like waiting for him to text me back. This book felt very heartfelt and often bittersweet. The fact that it's a debut is very impressive. Like, great job, Robinson. This is a fantastic work. Now, I do want to provide a trigger warning, though this could kind of be a spoiler because it concerns the devastating news of her father. If you don't want any clues about what happens, please skip to this timestamp here. Okay, if you're still here, you're okay with a spoiler. That does, again, act as kind of a trigger warning. There is the death of a parent due to cancer in this. And it's discussed and described on page of his progression through it. So we find out that Emma's dad has basically terminal cancer, so she spends time with her father before he ends up losing his battle and his life. And this is the section that made me cry like a fucking baby. If that topic would be hard to read about, please go into this very cautiously or potentially look at skipping it because it plays a very major role in the plot and impacts Emma, and again, it's very much on page. It made me cry reading it. Okay, spoiler over. All in, I really liked this. Even if it was a bit slower to get into, I really enjoyed my time with this. I was rooting for Emma. I loved the romance. I love the themes that were all works in progress. There's not going to be this like magical moment where we're ever 100% normal or 100% happy. That's just not life. And that's okay, because we can learn how to handle what life throws our way. We can control our reactions to things, even if we can't control others or the world at large. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It was honest, relatable, and not exactly what I was expecting. I found this very beautiful, hopeful, and really a great read if you feel stuck, or you're struggling, or you're just kind of in that mindset of like, well, by golly, if I achieve X, Y, and Z, then I'll be complete and happy. It's about learning to be happy and embracing life now, the good and the bad, and experiencing it all as the person that you want to be. So, fantastic read. So next up was a wintry read that I have been saving, and that is The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. So, confession, I truly went into this book expecting not to like it. And normally I don't do that. I don't pick books that like I've already read reviews for or like I know I'm not going to enjoy it. But this one I was very curious about, and I found it for super cheap on the book outlet, so picked it up. I kind of actually did want to read it knowing that I expected this to be bad and seeing what I really thought of it. I'd seen this pop up on some of the worst reads lists, and it has a real mixed bag on Goodreads, so my expectations were pretty low. But at the same time, I had seen other people like rave about this, so again, it's kind of just one of those books that it seems like either you love it or you hate it. But let's see what it promised first. Alex has all but given up on her dreams of becoming a published author when she receives a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Attend an exclusive month-long writing retreat at the estate of feminist horror writer Rosa Vallow. Even the knowledge that Ren, and actually maybe it's Vallo? It's Vallo. I'm gonna say Vallow. Even the knowledge that Ren, her former best friend and current rival, is attending doesn't dampen her excitement. But when the attendees arrive, Rosa drops a bombshell. They must all complete an entire novel from scratch during the next month. And the author of the best one will receive a life-changing seven-figure publishing deal. Determined to win this seemingly impossible contest, Alex buckles down and tries to ignore the strange happenings at the estate, including Rosa's erratic behavior, Ren's cruel mind games, and the alleged haunting of the mansion itself. But when one of the writers vanishes during a snowstorm, Alex realizes that something very sinister is afoot. With the clock running out, she must discover the truth or suffer the same fate. A claustrophobic and propulsive thriller exploring the dark side of female relationships and fame, The Writing Retreat is the unputdownable debut novel from a compelling new talent. So I will say, I flew through this. I think I read it in like 2 days because it kind of is unputdownable. It was creepy. It is extremely chaotic. And there were many times that I'm sitting there just like, what the fuck is going on in this book? But overall, I kind of enjoyed being on this crazy train. So this one ended up exceeding my expectations. And again, maybe it's because they were low. So the bar was pretty easy to get over. So we have our protagonist, Alex, and she obviously has some problems. And I really loved watching her grow and evolve throughout the story. She's got this like whole subscription of issues to overcome. And I was rooting for her to find her power and recognize her own self-worth. I also loved that there were some things with her that were kind of left open-ended, and there are still things that she needs to work on. It's not like she crawled out of this retreat and is now a perfect person. The character of Rosa was complex and intriguing, even though I hated her. Ren was also an interesting character, and I could picture her clearly. I know her type, very Regina George, and the relationship between Ren and Alex was extremely unhealthy, extremely obsessive, but it also made for some really great tension. It also felt very realistic. Like, I've seen friendships like this play out in person. The other writers that were at the retreat were fun, but obviously they're not taking center stage. Now, this was a locked room mystery meets women's lit. I really love the setting of the gothic and probably haunted mansion and the group of women writers. The atmosphere in this is absolutely fantastic. The mansion, while large, just feels so claustrophobic, and you just get that feeling that something is just off with this house. While Alex and the other writers are losing their own sense of time during this writing retreat, it also feels like they and us as the readers are losing our sense of reality. I also loved how the weather played a major role in trapping them here and making it even more like stifling at times. But I do think there is an area that this book suffers, and it's the fact that it's trying to do a lot. It's blending a lot of genres and trying to bring up like socio, sexual, and political issues, but it also doesn't really do much with them. They're just kind of plopped into the story and nothing's really done with them. Like, on the genre front, I never really knew where this story was going, and that kind of seems like it was Bartz's aim. Like, she definitely is not afraid to embrace wild plot twists and reveals. Now, the ending reminded me of my reading experiences with Taylor Adams' work. I love his writing style, I love his ideas, but his endings are like being trapped on a never-ending roller coaster, and there comes a point where I can't suspend my disbelief anymore, and I just want the books to be over. I kind of felt the same here, because it's like we're approaching the end, but like, nope, we've got another like loop-de-loop or another issue and fall, and then another twist, and there's one more thing over here. It feels like we were reaching a conclusion, But then we'd like pivot and do something else. Like, just get to the point, close the book, we're done. Though I do like that Bartz gave us an actual denouement and like showed us what happened after the writing treat was done. There were also things at the end that felt like they never really got resolved. Like they were just written just to make the story more spooky when it wasn't needed. I still ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Even with some of its faults and like utter implausibility, I was kind of engaged and I had to keep reading. Like, this is outlandish and at the times extremely over the top, but it ended up being just kind of fun. Like, I can see why this has polarizing reviews. This seems like, again, the type of book that you're either going to love it or you are going to hate it, because it is just a wild ride. Honestly, no one is more surprised than me that I actually liked this. I am excited to see what Julia Bartz comes out with next, and now I have to read her sister's work, as I have The Spare Room by Andrea Bartz on my to-be-read shelf. So, interesting, good wintry read. I think if you go into it with lowered expectations or just, again, being ready to embrace the chaos, you'll have a pretty good time with it. Next up was another title that I'd been saving for snowy season. Even though the day after I started reading this, we warmed up and into the 50s and all of our snow melted, but whatever, I was already starting to read it. This was also my first read by this author, and that is Outside by Ragnar Jonasson, and I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name. But let's go ahead and see what this one promised, because look at that cover. That just screams January. Isolated, but not alone. When a deadly snowstorm strikes the Icelandic highlands, 4 friends seek shelter in a small, abandoned hunting lodge. It's in the middle of nowhere, and there's no way of communicating with the outside world. As the night darkens and fears intensify, an old tragedy gradually surfaces, one that forever changed the course of their friendship. Those dark memories could hold the key to the mystery the friends now find themselves in. So I'm going to say I don't know if reading this after the writing retreat was a bad idea, as that book had a very strong start, and my God, this did not. The prologue / preview of what's to come, I did think that was really well done and intriguing, but then we actually start the story, and I was both bored and a little frustrated. One of our main characters does not want to be on this trip, and I wasn't given a really good reason why he felt compelled to go. Another character doesn't seem to want to be there either, and they're all adults, so why are they there? I mean, I know it's so the story can happen, but can you actually make it seem like they want to be there, or there's a good reason for them to go, even if they don't want to? None of these characters seem to care about each other as friends. In fact, there's this undercurrent of tension right away. I'd buy into it more had they been really good friends and had fallen out of touch and were coming together for a birthday or a celebration. But everyone is dragging their feet to get to this getaway. I don't understand why they're there to begin with, and so it makes it harder to buy into the entire premise of the story. There's also 2 of the 4 characters acting completely shifty from the jump, and there's a lot of meaningful eye contact between characters and characters saying cryptic sentences to create a lot of intrigue. But it just annoyed me. Get me invested into the story before having this trip go off the rails. Because again, I don't buy it. And then when the story does start to go off the rails, it relied on a lot of goofy or childish setups. Now, I do wonder if this being translated gave it some issues, because the dialogue was atrocious, and the writing itself felt very basic, or there were some not what I consider nonsensical word choices that I think probably weren't there in the original Icelandic. So again, not sure if it's a translation issue or what happened there. Or I guess maybe his writing just is very simple. Now, I will say I did like the setting, and I could picture the snowy landscapes of Iceland, I could feel the cold, and I understood the threat that the weather played. I do also think that this moved at quite a quick pace because each chapter is like 4 pages long and is from a different character's point of view. So this book moves. The writing, again, it felt very basic and is to the point, so there's not much depth there. So again, I think that makes this a much faster reading experience. It really feels like this book is doing the bare minimum to be a thriller or even an entertaining story. And then it threw any previous effort out the window with the ending. The ending is so abrupt and leaves so much open that it feels like it's not an ending. Like, I was mad when I finished this book. And the worst part is the book then has a snippet for the next book that this author has. If you didn't see the bold title, you would just assume the story keeps going. It's just, that is how abrupt this ending is. It doesn't make any sense. I also do want to provide a trigger warning as there is some SA in this. I'll be doing a wine club episode on this book as I have to talk about some things and spoil some things. Though if you read 20 pages into this book, you can easily guess how this is going to play out, and you will be right. But even reading those 20 pages would be reading too much of this book. I gave this 1 star. I really cannot recommend this. I guess if you needed something to read on a flight, this would suffice, but I just did not think this was good. But I was also not good about it either because one of my reading goals for 2025 is to allow myself to DNF things, and I should have with this, and I didn't, so I'm shaming myself as well because I should have DNF'd this. It was bad. It was bad. Don't recommend. Next up was something a little funny to shake things up and get rid of the bad taste of the last book, and that was I Might Be in Trouble by Daniel Aleman, which I also got through Book of the Month. I made quite a lot of progress on my Book of the Month backlog in January, but let's go ahead and see what this promised. Life is tough. Moving a dead body is tougher. A few years ago, David Alvarez had it all. A 6-figure book deal, a loving boyfriend, and an exciting writing career. His debut novel was a resounding success, which made the publication of his second book, a total flop, all the more devastating. Now, David is single, lonely, and desperately trying to come up with a great idea for his next manuscript. One that will redeem him in the eyes of readers, reviewers, the entire publishing world, and maybe even his ex-boyfriend. The issue is, good ideas are hard to come by, and the mounting pressure of a near-empty bank account isn't helping. But when David connects with a sexy stranger on a dating app, he figures a wild night out in New York City may just be what he needs to find inspiration. Lucky for him, his date turns out to be handsome, confident, and wealthy, not to mention the perfect distraction from yet another evening staring at a blank screen. After one of the best nights of his life, David wakes up hungover, but giddy, only to find Prince Charming dead next to him in bed. Horrified, completely confused, and suddenly faced with the implausible, but somehow plausible, idea that he may have actually killed his date, David calls the only person he can trust in a moment of crisis, his literary agent, Stacy. Together, David and Stacy must untangle the events of the previous night, cover their tracks, and spin the entire misadventure into David's career-defining novel, if only they can figure out what to do with the body first. So I loved the themes in this. Again, especially the idea that what happens after we achieve one of our dreams. So it felt very similar to Definitely Better Now in that regard. We like to think that we just arrive at a destination and we're complete and happy. But then what? We're still alive. Life is still happening around and to us. It's not like David got his book published and then his life was completely perfect and he never had to do anything again. The themes in this were wonderful. I thought they were really well balanced, and I was honestly never bored while reading this. It was very addictive and funny. I loved the humor and casual tone in this. It really felt like my friend David was telling me this story, or it kind of reminded me of Sex and the City when it was actually still good. And you're hearing Carrie talk to you and she's just telling you what's going on with her world and her friends. It had that same kind of vibe. Now, I will say one thing that I did struggle with was suspending my disbelief with the whole dead guy in the bed thing. I know. I need to accept it to let the story happen, but it felt very contrived, and to me, there wasn't really a strong enough reason for David to not call the police. Like, his whole, implausible but plausible reason for killing him, I guess, maybe, I don't know. I think I wanted more, stakes. It felt very low stakes, the way it was written. Though the sequences of living out a, weekend at Bernie's situation, they were so funny. I mean, as long as you like dark humor, because, corpse comedy. But this book is also more than just dark comedy. It's moving. I also really love David as a main character, and I loved his agent Stacy. I would so read a book about her and her life. This book is going to get a Books and Bubbly episode, as I really enjoyed this, but I can't say too much in this review without spoiling things. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend it. Just be prepared, again, kind of like, I guess, with a writing retreat, be prepared to roll with the punches and embrace the absurdity of it all, and you will have a blast with this book. So next was the pick for my January read for my book club, and that was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is my first read by her, and I was really curious about her writing and her books, and so luckily this got picked for book club, so it was a great excuse to read it. But let's see what this promised. Aging and reclusive Hollywood movie icon, Evelyn Hugo, is finally ready to tell the truth about her glamorous and scandalous life. But when she chooses unknown magazine reporter Monique Grant for the job, no one is more astounded than Monique herself. Why her? Why now? Monique is not exactly on top of the world. Her husband has left her, and her professional life is going nowhere. Regardless of why Evelyn has selected her to write her biography, Monique is determined to use this opportunity to jumpstart her career. Summoned to Evelyn's luxurious Manhattan apartment, Monique listens in fascination as Evelyn tells her story, from making her way to Los Angeles in the 1950s to her decision to leave show business in the 80s, and, of course, the 7 husbands along the way. Evelyn unspools a tale of ruthless ambition, unexpected friendship, and a great forbidden love. Monique begins to feel a very real connection to the legendary star. But as Evelyn's story nears its conclusion, it becomes clear that her life intersects with Monique's own in tragic and irreversible ways. Written with Reid's signature talent for creating complex, likable characters, this is a mesmerizing journey through the splendor of old Hollywood and to the harsh realities of the present day as 2 women struggle with what it means and what it costs to face the truth. This is the second book that I read this month that made me cry, and in a good cathartic way, not because it was bad. I really liked this. I do think the pace gets a bit slow and muddy at some points, but overall, I thought this was an absolutely beautiful story about love, passion, recognition, and regret. It felt very realistic and true to life with how Hollywood has evolved as Evelyn begins her career in the 50s. It was glamorous, but it was also very backstabby. Even off the sets, actors still had to keep up a persona and grapple with the ideas of, is anything in their life actually true? I really liked Evelyn as a character, as she's complex and has really made peace with who she is. She has some regrets, but there are other things that she basically says, I would do over and over again if I had to. She is an icon and a force of nature, and she knows it and uses it. I stan a woman who doesn't have time for bullshit and just tells it like it is. Now, she definitely has some flaws and makes some really bad decisions, but at least she owns that. She admits that these were bad decisions. Now, I will say I do wish I'd gotten to know Monique better, or perhaps her story had been cut entirely. I know she's the reason we're getting the story from Evelyn, her doing this interview is the framing device, but it felt really random when we'd switch back to her, because we barely get to know her or really spend any time with her. So when like her emotional scenes arrive or when we see her character develop, it didn't feel as impactful as it could have. And we are teased in the cover copy that Evelyn is going to tell her something that will make Monique hate her. I really do appreciate that it wasn't so in your face. Like, it's not the constant like drip drop of like, haha, I'm going to tell you something soon. But it was also annoying at times because Evelyn would say it and Monique would just sit there with it and wouldn't try and push the issue. I mean, I guess she probably knows she can't, but I'm still like, can you at least like ask a question back? So for genres, this is definitely contemporary fiction meets historical fiction, and I was really invested in Evelyn's story and hearing about her multiple marriages and why she married the guys she did and what the truth was about some of their relationships. The title may talk about the husbands, but it's because they are the husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is her story. It is her life. And these men were lucky to call her their wife. That was very Dr. Seuss. But seriously, this book was complex. It drew me in. It was reflective, at times heartbreaking, and at times it was lighting a fire under my own ass and serving as a reminder to go after what I want. I think this book had a lovely blend of genres and themes and pulled it off very well. I can't really say too much without spoiling things, so I definitely recommend that you go read this if you haven't already. If you love old school Hollywood, powerful women, and epic love stories, you will probably really like this. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I found this to be a very compelling read, and it really makes you think. I think I will probably be making a Books and Bubbly episode about this book, as it was just such a good read, and I'm so glad it was picked for our Book of the Month box. Next up is yet another Book of the Month pick, as I am just flying through them this month. And this is the January Book of the Month pick that I did, which is A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall, as I've really enjoyed Marshall's writing before. So let's go ahead and see what this wintry thriller promised. A whirlwind romance. When Theodora Scott met Connor, wealthy, charming, and a member of the powerful Dalton family, she fell in love in an instant. 6 months later, he's brought her to Idlewood, his family's isolated winter retreat, to win over his skeptical relatives. Stay away from Connor Dalton. Theo has tried to ignore the threatening messages on her phone, but she can't ignore the footprints in the snow outside the cabin window, or the strange sense of familiarity she has about this place. Then, in a disused cabin, Theo finds something impossible. A photo of herself as a child. A photo taken at Idlewood. I've been here before. Theo has almost no recollection of her earliest years, but now she begins to piece together the fragments of her memories and realizes she is in terrible danger. Someone here has a shocking secret that they will do anything to keep hidden, and discovering what happened at Idlewood may cost Theo everything. So all in, I thought this was a very good thriller that I really struggled to put down. I avoided a lot of my other responsibilities to continue reading this. And I do think there are a lot of plot threads and red herrings and misdirects in this to keep you guessing. But at the same time, that was something that made me struggle with this in the end. It was just a constant reveal and twist and twist and twist after twist that I got very close to rolling my eyes. And the entire setup requires a lot of suspension of disbelief and just felt very unrealistic. But like I said, I still ignored all my other responsibilities to read this as fast as I could. So if you embrace the plot and again, just kind of the crazy shenanigans, you'll probably have a good time with this. I really do love Marshall's writing, and I find it very easy to convince myself to read just one more chapter. And this had pretty short chapters, so it was very easy to keep going and trying to figure out what was going on and why. Because we have Theo, who finds herself at Idlewood and just has no memory of being there, but then finding evidence that yes, she has been there before. I enjoyed the mystery, but I also found it to be a bit slow at times, and Theo keeps bringing up the same things over and over again as if they're new thoughts, and they're not. Get with the program, Theo. Like, we've already talked about this clue before. And a lot of the, puzzle pieces seem to fall right into her lap, which just, it kind of felt lazy. Like, she's investigating a little bit, but it's also like people are just telling her things that they wouldn't really be telling her, or she just happens to find a piece of evidence. It felt a little lazy. Now, I did like Theo as our main character, but like I said, I do wish at times she just had to work harder for her answers or delve deeper into her own history. We get just enough, but I wanted more. I wanted to know her more, or why she had certain thoughts about herself that seem to kind of come and go as the plot needs them to. And for someone who had a not so easy childhood and had quite a bit of trauma, she can be very naive or comes across as pretty aloof about kind of alarming things. I expected her to be a lot more distrustful and guarded than she often is. Or maybe that's just me projecting. I also think the cast is quite large, but I do think they were pretty easy to keep track of. Everyone seems kind of shifty or cold, or seems like they're hiding their true selves. So it's very easy to cast suspicions on a variety of different people, so it will keep you guessing, who knows what, who's doing what is actually going on here. This family is your stereotypical, dysfunctional, crazy rich family who has nothing to fear because they can buy their way out of anything, which means they're probably capable of anything. I did really enjoy the setting for this locked room mystery. I could easily picture the cabins and the lodge and the grounds. It was a great backdrop for this semi-locked room murder mystery. It was very atmospheric, but sometimes the cold or winter aspects did seem to fade into the background when I thought they'd be a little bit more prevalent. But overall, I thought she did a really good job of blending atmosphere and action. The last thing I'll say is I didn't love the ending, which is funny, as I love that the ending gives us closure and wraps up 90% of the plot threads. We actually got a denouement, and the mystery came together quite nicely, but I wanted closure on certain subplots or things from Theo's past that I felt were left hanging or unresolved, especially with her so-called parents. I wanted more of a resolution there. Or don't spend so much time during the story on it when we're not going to close it out or do anything with it. I guess I can also say I didn't love the change in perspectives at time. It's we'd get these flashback scenes, but they're in a new point of view. It was kind of weird. It's you did something bad, and then you saw that someone saw you do that something bad, so you had to go see what they knew. It took me out of the story, as I had to switch from first person, and then all of a sudden I'm being talked at, but I'm supposed to be in place of a character. And they weren't really offset in their own chapters. I don't know, it was just kind of a weird formatting and structure thing. This was definitely a fast-paced and twisty popcorn thriller. I think if the premise had just been set up a tad better and didn't require so much convenience, this would have been a 4-star read, but it is coming in at 3.5 stars, which is still a pretty good rating. I liked this, and I would recommend it as a wintertime thriller. I did see a Goodreads reviewer named Kimberly who did sum up her review quite nicely, call me a Hoover because I sucked this thing up, and I feel the same way. Wasn't quite the best read of the year so far, but it was definitely bingeable, and I really do look forward to seeing what Marshall has coming out next, though I still have These Fleeting Shadows on my to-be-read shelf by her that I need to crack open one of these days. But all in, for a fun winter thriller, this was a pretty decent pick. Okay, last book of January was one that I expected to be a quick read and a decent read because it's an author I've read before. And that was Never Lie by Freida McFadden. Let's go ahead and see what this promised. Newlyweds Trisha and Ethan are searching for the house of their dreams. They think they found it when they visit the remote manor that once belonged to Dr. Adrian Hale, a renowned psychiatrist who vanished without a trace years ago. But when a violent winter storm traps them at the estate, the house begins to lose its appeal. Stuck inside and growing restless, Trisha stumbles on a collection of audio transcripts from Dr. Hale's sessions with patients. As Trisha listens to the cassette tapes, she learns about the terrifying chain of events leading up to the doctor's mysterious disappearance. With each tape, another shocking piece of the puzzle falls into place, and a web of lies slowly unravels. But by the time Trisha reaches the final cassette, the one that will reveal the entire horrifying story, it will be too late. From #1 New York Times bestselling author Freida McFadden comes an addictive, unpredictable thriller that will keep you asking the question, what is the truth? So I have a love-hate relationship with her work. Some of her books I absolutely love, and some books I want to set on fire. This fell in that category. I love that her work is like the definition of a popcorn thriller. They tend to have interesting premises, and her writing is super easy to follow because it's pretty basic. But sometimes the writing is too simplistic, and it just becomes really mediocre. This read like a first draft, but the publisher knew that they were going to make money, so why spend money on editing it? I'm also realizing with McFadden, I tend to hate her protagonists. I felt the same with her book, The Boyfriend, that oh my god, was that just last month that I read that? I think I read it in December. But Sydney, the main character in that, was the dumbest motherfucker. I wanted to reach into the book and just punch her in the throat. She was too stupid to live, and she infuriated me. And Trisha, in this, also bugged the hell out of me. And yet I'm supposed to think that she's got above average intelligence. This woman's a ding-dong. And if you haven't picked up by my tone, I did not enjoy this. The premise of this is really good, but once we get the twists and reveals, I wanted to throw this across the room. Mostly because this book should not have been written in first-person point of view. The twists are illogical and feel very much like they're in there, so McFadden can say, "Haha, gotcha, didn't see that coming, did ya?" No, I did not, because it doesn't make any sense. A twist, for the sake of a twist, is not good writing. I will give credit that one of the twists did surprise me, but it's kind of just there and we didn't really do anything with it, so like, cool, you got me, but like, what now? So like many of her reads, we have dueling timelines and 2 leads, and both of our leads are awful people. There's also a point where I realized, man, McFadden just likes to beat my eyes with a sledgehammer as she writes her red herrings. She's practically bolding and underlining text to like hint at something, and of course it ends up meaning nothing at the end. Like, it's basically just a misdirect. I'm on to you, McFadden. If it feels like a misdirect, it's because it is. I also have to say the writing in this was very, very bad. Like, I honestly started tabbing pages because I had to keep track of how bad this was, and just the fact that I could not believe that this was an edited and formally published work. There's a lot of needless repetition, inane inner monologues, and barely there descriptions. I could not really tell you what this house looked like, felt like, or smelled like. Like, the setting is not in the room with us during this book. This is gonna go in the hate pile from McFadden's work. I was not happy reading this, but at least I guess it was a fast read and had some interesting elements, but I still did not like this, nor can I recommend this. I gave this 1.5 stars, and that half star is only because one of the twists got me and I didn't see it coming. This was not well done, and it really feels like it was written just for like the shock value of the twists. than actually spending the time and crafting a solid twist that brought everything together. There's going to be a wine club episode on this. And honestly, now that I'm thinking it, maybe I should do a video where I rank and review her work to see how I really feel about it. Because I'm starting to feel like more of these are getting lower ratings. Though I did notice that this was kind of like her 1x1 book, which I absolutely hated. It was previously self-published and then picked up. And not that there's a problem with self-publishing. I want to do it too someday. But I do think if a traditional publisher is going to pick it up, they owe it to the people that are going to pay for this to actually give it a good edit and make sure that it makes sense. Or don't republish it and just have her rewrite this premise, or because she owns the idea. I don't know what's going on with this. With this, I could not buy into the ridiculous premise, whereas like the writing retreat I could, but this made me mad. Again, I feel like her writing I have a love-hate relationship with. Like either I am buying in and going along for the ride, or I want to rip the pages out and throw them in my fireplace. And this book definitely fell in the latter category. So, unfortunately, while there were plenty of good reads in January, the month kind of ended on a sour note. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with what I read this month, and I'm really excited that I dabbled in a few different genres rather than just my standard, more thriller-focused reading month. So, really enjoyed that I checked out some new stuff. If you have any recs for what I should read in February, please drop them in the comments below. I do have a few romances, as Valentine's Day is approaching faster than I think it is, and I want a few good romance reads, so I think I've got a few good ones picked out, or I hope they're going to be good, plus some thrillers. But if you have any recommendations for good February reads, I would love to hear about them. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next month in the reading room.